you very much for having me here today. So today I'm going to introduce you to a network that we have started just to establish. So as you know, aging is happening across the world, but of course it has been happening in Europe for quite a longer period of time, and a place like Italy, you see in it quite a decades of it happening, and we're trying to work out what's the best policy in a positive way. So how to engage people, how to keep people participating, and also how to support people who need care. But in other parts and regions of the world, this is happening as if it's happening silently, because other things seems to take more priority. So in places like the Middle East, you have the youth bulk, you have a lot of unemployment, you have pressing issues for policy, but at the same time, aging is occurring. So I'm going to try to introduce you to this. This is a new activity. It is an opportunity to invite you to collaborate and to see how we can learn from the lessons and from the experience that we're having in Europe, but understanding that it has to be context and culturally kind of sensitive. But also Italy, perhaps a good place to start, where family is so important, intergenerational support is so important, but actually family is not always available. You've got a very low fertility rate, mobility and migration issues. So we decided to call it, and I'll give you the history where we come here, but we decided to have a focus on healthy aging, or aging healthy. So we call it MENARAH, and MENARAH means lighthouse in Arabic. So we thought that would be a nice kind of a parallel when we talk about older people. There is a lighthouse, but it links very well to the SDGs, the UN SDGs 2030, and also the decade of healthy aging that has been just launched by the World Health Organization. So just to give you a kind of a brief introduction where we are. So why it's important, it's basically a success story. We have had, in the Middle East, they experienced a decline in mortality rates. So of course, you're all aware of these demographic transitions, where society starts with very high fertility rate, high mortality rate, then the mortality rate dropped, population growth was kind of high, then fertility rates dropped, then you kind of got the balance. But the kind of pace and trends vary across the world, and now in the region you have a history of very high fertility rates, and then fertility rates dropped, but you've got increase in life expectancy, people are living longer, and large numbers and cohorts of people entering into old age, and the systems are not really designed for that. But we have to be aware that the Arab region, or the Middle East and North Africa, which includes countries like Turkey, like Iran, so it's quite a very big region, have different experiences and different pace of where they are. And I'll show you some examples, particularly, for example, if you look at Lebanon, for example. So these are just a quick indicators, and we can debate for hours whether these are good indicators or not, like just looking at how many people are older than 65. But we still treat the age of 65 as this is the age of retirement, although it's of course is different now in some countries in Europe. And we can say that people remain productive, and they do remain productive after 65. But this is just an indicator to give you the proportion of older people, or how aged the population is. So you can see this variability that I was talking about, and you can see that, for example, Lebanon and Tunisia are two of the countries which have very relatively high proportions of people ages 65 plus, but you see other countries like Mauritania and other Gulf countries at the bottom region. And similarly, the life expectancy are actually increasing everywhere, which is a success story, but there is variability across the countries within the regions. But this aging also is not happening in absence. There are lots of other things happening at the same time as ever. So we're seeing, socio-demographic changes, we see epidemiological transition, we see the types of diseases are different. So non-communicable diseases are taking a center stage. We see comorbidity, we see people expenditure, household out of pocket, real cost on health increasing because the systems are not very good, or some of it are not excellent. So a lot of things happening at the same time. We see urbanization, we see people moving away from the family home, whether internal migration or international migration. So a lot of things occurring in the same time. And when you study aging or try to set up policies, it's kind of, you have to take account of all these things. So why is it unique? You know, every country, you know, a lot of countries before in Europe or the Western world in America have aged. What's new about this region in particular? There are specific features that are very unique to that region, and it relates to the history of when the fertility rates and mortality rates has changed. And that means that the pace of aging is incredibly fast in some countries than the experience we had in the Western society. So in some countries, you've got, like, on average between 13 to 40 years before a country moved from an aging population to an aged population. And of course that relates to some demographic definitions. But this is a very short time span when you think about policy, when you think about services, when you think about kind of investing in the workforce and the infrastructure, in the environment of the people that are living in. So this is a very short period when you compare it to some OECD countries, which on average between 50 to 150 years of change, that we could try policies, we get it wrong, we try again, we tweak it here, we tweak it there. What seems to be the case in that region, that a lot of lessons have to be learned first, and, you know, we come from a point of kind of a strong position to start with because there is not much time. But also we have the two competing things, that at the same time population aging is happening, you have youth bulks. We still have very large cohorts from previous cohorts of fertility, high fertility, entering into the youth age, which is labor active groups between 15 to 49. So you have two big policies at the same place that countries has to really fathom with, is how to get employment for this large group, how to get them active, how to elevate poverty, and how to think about the older age groups, which, you know, they haven't thought about before. There are no kind of systems in place. And that's a huge pressure to think about. Although it provides opportunity, because you've got this, what they call population dividends. So you've got people who can work if you get them to work, and who can pay taxes if you get them to pay taxes, that then you can use to help other people, because you've got this middle group that is active and capable, you know, and can economically produce. So you've got opportunities, but it's just how to use this opportunity, how to set the system right, and how to set it in a way that is fair to different groups. So there are major implications, of course, when we think about you know, a region where care, regardless of its aged care or child care, is a family business, and it's a women business. It's not the state business. It is something that the family used to take on, and they continue to take on in different ways. So there are huge implications, particularly in women. So I just been to Cairo, and I will talk about that, and did some engagement events. And you've got a lot of active women who are participating in the labor market, who have very high professional kind of jobs, but they are torn between caring for the parents, caring for their children, and working and caring in the house. And it is a very family business. They have to be seen to be providing that, and they want to do it. So again, if you think about the individual person who grow older, if there is no infrastructure, if there is no system to support them to participate and to support them to continue active, what is the quality of life that they would have? You think about the family carer, what kind of pressures, emotional, financial, and physical pressures you put on them. And if you think about the system in general, so how the system can prepare and be aware of this as an issue, how the policy could develop, and you know, financial burdens. So if you think the state is going to take some part of this work, at what financial cost, and how they're going to generate that income, how they're going to regulate and prepare a workforce to take part of this work. So there's huge issues in play, and opportunities also to learn from other countries and other regions. So just a brief thing about where this has come from, and I alluded to that. So last year, in 2019, I secured a very small pot of funding to start building a partnership through the Global Challenge Research Fund for partnership building. And through that, we were very successful in setting up a regional workshop where we had input from international organizations like the United Nations, like the World Health Organization, and also kind of regional NGOs like Help Age Jordan, academics, etc. And we decided that there is quite interest in this topic. It was timely, so by chance last year, the aging strategy for the Arab region has been launched by the UNFPA, and we had people from the UNFPA coming to the workshop introducing this policy. So there is a bit of momentum that was going on. And obviously I've been kind of writing about these issues for a number of years through some invitation to provide expert input to some countries in the region where they were developing their aging strategy. So I advised the Turkish government in their dementia strategy and aging strategy in 2016, 17, and the Omani countries when they were developing their social protection policy as well. And this year, I secured another small pot of money to really put this, to consolidate in this network and put it in a more present way in the web. So we decided to develop an online network where the partners could be seen, could express their interests in certain areas, and also we could then develop larger funding grants applications that we can go as a coherent team to do to apply for different funding. That hopefully we will produce a very short video to raise awareness of these issues in the region, and I will be inviting you if you would like to comment, and we have kind of short interviews with you. This is in a nutshell, and these are kind of quick references to some of the articles, and it's culminated with being involved in 2018 with UNESCO, where they developed their report on aging, and you could see in the region that they had a very big focus on dignity and well-being, and this is where we kind of still focusing on dignity, well-being, and health in its broadest terms. So yes, ill health is important, comorbidity is important, but environment is so important, and social participation is so important, and being able to live actively and be able to look after yourself is very important. So we are thinking about health in its quite broadest term rather than just ill health and disease. So this year, last year, I've been invited by the UN to present on their expert meeting on aging in Bangkok. This is some pictures from the workshop that we held in Cairo, and this is a kind of agenda. And also we had a meeting with the UN International Institute for Aging in Malta, who are also keen to be a partner with that. They are very keen in developing capacity in the region, and they see the region as kind of a blind spot at the moment, so there is not much being done there. So just to tell you where I am this year, so I've had several meetings. I have a meeting with yourselves, and then we are planning when I go back to set up the MENARAH network website and have people on, and also to work on the film production. So that would be part of this website, and I'll put a blog kind of summarizing all these activities. So I have a blog already published on last year's activity, but that would kind of be the host of the family where we are here. So what are the aims of this network? So ultimately we want to be able to do research in the region and inform policy and inform practice. But we have a strong focus on the UN SDGs, particularly health for all and gender equality. And obviously, there is a whole decade of aging, healthy aging that's been launched. That is in our focus. We want to have opportunity to collaborate and do some co-writing if there is opportunity for that. But definitely is to enhance this strong relation that we have built with the WHO, with the UN, with academic partners, and to try to find opportunities to collaborate. There are so many opportunities. Technology is going so fast in the region, and we can use it for aging, for informal carers, for a lot of issues. You've got, of course, diversity and inequalities. So you've got some stratas of the population who can pay for care, but they can't find care. There are no regulations, there are no workforce standards. And you've got also strata which can't find anything. So there is room to have like social development, social protection policies. So there is room for all kind of work to be done in the region. So I alluded to that, why the Italian experience is interesting. So I think there is an interest in a lot of the whole European experience, but Italy presents itself as a very kind of a family aged care model. So you still work on that premises, which is really interesting because you've been here for so many decades working on aging, and this is still the premises, still the focus point. And there's a lot of learning to be learned because, yes, the family is so important. I know how the fertility rate is quite low from a demographic point of view. I know that you might find a niece who's looking after different aunties. I know that the informal care is taking a huge burden in coordinating care, and it's left for the individuals to organize and sort out things. But at the same time, there are systems to support people. They can be right, they can be wrong, so there's a lot of learning to be held. The idea that you don't like care homes as such resonates very much with the Middle East. So I've had interviews in the region where people said, we really need to change the perception because sometimes care homes can be good for people. They can have better quality of life, but we cannot do that. It's a taboo, it's a stigma. We cannot live with the society if somebody learned that we have put our mother or aunt in a care home. They were talking about, okay, let's do daycare. Let's just have places where you can offer dignified care, protected care, regulated care for a short period of time so people can have respite, they can have breaks. So there are middle ways to be found. And also, your policies and your research touches upon a lot of things that we have talked about, from active aging to the use of technology, to the idea of migration. And obviously, migrant care is a big thing in some regions in the Middle East, particularly the Gulf region, where migrant workers are so important, and they do all these things like live-in care, but it's unregulated. So there's a lot of things to be learned from the Italian experience. So these are really just discussion points, just pointers for us when we have a little bit of discussion. And I think when you just introduce yourself, you're already talking about that, but maybe think about what lessons can be taken to the Middle East, the region, in terms of the social capital. So Italy, you have a huge history of mobilizing social capital and using social capital in long-term care and the co-production models. And I think this is a very good entry point to the region, with the community is so important, and neighborhood this is important, kind of a local environment for people. Gender issues at the top of the agenda. So life expectancy is, there are differentials by age, as we know. So there is like a 5 years gap in the Middle East between life expectancy of men and women. But historically, the interspousal age gap has been very high. So it's very normal for some generation to have an age gap of 10, 15 years between the husband and wife. So what does this mean? That you end up with a lot of widowed. A lot of widowed from a young age, relatively young age, from their 50s, living alone, and living alone for a long time. And their family has moved away, and there is not much in the local community to do. So it's a real issue that it's gendered at both ends, as the older people, but also at the people who provide care. You know, it's women. Sons can provide money, can provide housing, but the day-to-day care is the daughters and daughters-in-law issue. And of course, there are issues here about abuse and hidden abuse and different forms of abuse, and the stigma and stereotypes that we need to change.